Hi folks, back here on the coast again. Well, I've never left it actually because I live here, but this is just above my house at Curio Bay, but this bay is looking the other direction, further west, and it's called Haldane Bay. A nice spot, and yeah, sloping straight out to the southwest, west, a little bit to the south, and just here to do a bit of a video. Looking to your left, or the point that's in front of you, in this out that way, is Slope Point, and that's the most south point in the South Island of New Zealand. If you want to go further south in New Zealand, you can't really do it unless you go to Stewart Island, and out beyond that South Pole, about 4,500 kilometres away. Yeah, nice view. The one on the left here is Haldane Bay. It's got a nice breaking surf there, and a little bit of water further back is the Haldane estuary, and yeah, so I'm kind of surrounded by water here really. And these flax bushes here are actually naturally here. They've never been planted. When the Europeans first came here, these were flaxy headlands, and they ran cattle here because there was no forest, because the trees couldn't grow because of the salt spray. So yep, I bought this property for my aunt in 1971. She was the lady that brought up my dad, because his mother died at 12 years of age, and so sometimes when I was about 7 or 8, I used to visit my auntie here, and I just like the wild open spaces here. It reminds me of a piece of music she used to play. She used to get out of bed early in the morning, and she was a tall lady, about nearly 6 foot tall and quite big, and she loved playing the piano, and she used to play this piece of music which I've never heard since actually, called and it was called My Cathedral is in the Wide Open Places, and she used to hammer this out on the piano, and really quite vigorously, and it made me think in reflections 50 or 60 years later that she must have been a believer in Jesus, because the name of that piece of music was The Place Where I Worship. And I know she never ever went to church, but obviously she was a believer in the Lord, so that left an impression on me. And I never knew in those days that I would actually buy her farm off her. This was way back about 1940s, between the 40s and the 50s. Quite an amazing lady, and she was born as Jean Haldane, where the district behind me here gets its name from. Yeah, I was just thinking about what's going on in New Zealand, and at the beginning of April 2020, we'll look back on this time in our history and reflect how, in a kind of a way, how crazy it was and how unexpected it was to pop up on us. And but I think it's a time to reflect something about ourselves, to learn something about ourselves. I think we've led such busy lives in the previous years that have gone by that we've never taken time out to just think about stuff and really consider what's it all about, who we really are, and who really am I. And I think without the props in our lives that we've had over the years, we suddenly find out who we really are, and I think that's quite a nice thing really in one way, in spite of all the problems we have because of this lockdown, and also find out what is essential in life. You know, a lot of things we've had turned out to just be luxuries, and what is the essential thing in life? And really at the moment for us here, for me at Curio Bay with Celia, what is the essential thing is to have a roof over my head and enough food in the house to live. That's life's essentials, and we know that even those essentials have been deprived a lot of the world, in countries where people have been born into poverty and lived in poverty, and what we've taken is for granted. So it's a good time to realise that we've been truly blessed, having luxuries. You know, basically up until about 60 years ago, there were no refrigerators, or 60, or maybe a bit more than that, 70 or 80 years ago, and we take them for granted, but really at the end of the day, they're part of our new style of living that's come in the last 100 years. And so the essential things in life. I suppose for me, I always think, well, having family, having food, having good relationships, knowing love, they are some of the essential things. And maybe as we get back to there, we realise how blessed we have been to have all the other extras, which are cars and abilities to fly around the world, all those kind of things, just good roads. When I grew up here, the road was a mud road. It didn't have any gravel, and the only thing they could take down it was a horse. And we didn't get a good road here until about 1953. I was about 10 then. So we've moved on and we've become very sophisticated. And really, what are we putting our trust, hopes in at the moment? This situation, what are we really feeling about it? How do we view the future for this thing? Are we expecting that there's going to be a vaccine? Do we pin our hopes that someday there's going to be a vaccine that will stop all this? Or do we have hopes in the government that they're clever enough and wise enough to stop this thing in its tracks? I mean, I don't know what we put our hopes in. My hope is that is in the living God, actually, and that He could do something about it. I do have some other things here, which I was thinking about. Have we been chasing shadows? Some of these things that we actually have in life are kind of like shadows, actually. They're there delicately because of economic situations, because in essence we are quite fragile beings. Even though we're quite wonderfully made, we're quite fragile, and sometimes we chase things that are shadows. They fleet away. I think there was a group years ago used to sing a song called The Sound of Silence, and it was at Simon and Garfunkel, I just can't remember. But the sound of silence, I believe as we have become quietened in this week or two, and just sitting around home and reflecting, there's a silence sometimes there, and out of that silence we can hear something. We can smell the roses and notice the minute details and even the smallest flowers. These are just thoughts that may help you get through the next week or two, just thinking about some of this stuff. Do we take notice of minute detail? Like I'm standing here in the middle of my property here, and below me there's ryegrass, but peeking through there is just a little thing growing called a clover, and just the minute beauty in those 3 leaves coming out of that clover. Beautiful. Just noticing things that we didn't see before. Can we actually use this time to become people that notice what's around us? Sometimes we're in a car doing 100 kilometres an hour, going down the road, and what I've actually noticed is I've become a great lover of taking notice of the toys, that beautiful yellow plume that's growing, and down around Waikawa here, they're very beautiful along the sides of the roads. And for years I didn't notice them were part of my environment, but now I sort of think, those toys, aren't they beautiful? And they just stand out to me. I enjoy driving past them and noticing the beauty in them and the special colouring and the special plumage that's growing there. Can we come out of this with our second wind? you know, they talk about second wind when you're running, and you can get the pace going again because it's like a second injection of energy. But are you ready for a second injection of living when we come out of this? And maybe not be the same as when it started. Maybe we're noticing things and we realise life's about more of the things that we haven't noticed as we've been had in the last past in our lives. You know, I just realised that we are incredible creatures. We've got an ability to hear. We've got an ability to speak a language, so the creature beside us, that called a human being, can understand what we're saying. We can communicate. We're ingeniously made. Our hands can grasp something. They're beautifully made to grasp something. The perfect idea of 4 fingers and a thumb that you can grip something. That's ingenious. It's clever. We've actually been set aside from all other creatures in creation. There's no other creature in creation just like us. Just need to reflect on that and think, well, how can that be? How can that be that we stand above other creatures? Now, other creatures can do things we can't do, but the magnitude of the things we can do is amazing. Even the fact that I can talk to you on a video camera here at the south end of New Zealand, and something will record it, and I can put it on a system that will transmit this right around the world and to whoever hears it. It may not be much to hear, but it's just something that's been on my heart in the last few days. Of maybe we can fill in the times that we're sitting around home and listen to something, and maybe see a nice beach like we have in the background here, and maybe even see the most south point of New Zealand if you haven't seen it before, and it's called Slope Point. So this is a pretty short message. It's just something I was thinking about yesterday and started scribbling it down, and I can't think what the date is. We must be in the first it seems funny, but I've lost trace of days sometimes, and I can't think what the day was, and both my wife and myself have ended up being a day out. And it's funny, but if you haven't got a reference point, you don't know what the day is. The only thing she could do was go to the newspaper and see what the date of the news. I was on the newspaper and find out how many days we've had the newspaper. So maybe we're not used to this kind of thing. So I might leave it at that. I just thought you might enjoy another view here, and I've still got some other views, so I might do this again sometime. And the sun's out today, and there's not too much wind, so I've got to make the most of sunny days here and windless days. Otherwise, all you'll hear is wind on this microphone. And if you look, just before I close, if you look at in the distance, the Haldane estuary, and then this, if you can see a little bit to the right of that, the way you're viewing it, is the top of the Haldane estuary, and behind that top of that estuary is a little patch of trees. And my grandfather lived there many years ago, and my mother was brought up on that farm, and the name of that area is Haldane. It's named after my great-great-grandfather. So a bit of history here at the end of the world. And hey, God bless you, have a good week, and might see you some other time. So in the meantime, I'll say goodbye and all the best.